And a very good evening to you, and welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101 on a Friday night. I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining us from in Guyana or you're joining us from outside of Guyana. It's kind of what we would say here on the east coast of Demerara in Guyana. Kind of cloudy all day today. There wasn't very much rain. So it's a kind of pleasant, cool Friday night. And Lord, the times have changed. In the old days, a Friday night used to be the night before Saturday night. The night when people get pay and they come home and uh, you know the place used to be a buzz. Friday night now is just another night. Welcome all of you down on the sun on a Friday night to Politics 101. Uh, wow, quite a show last night with brother brother Slow, brother Paul Slow, giving us a comprehensive analysis of what happened there at Madia police, from the police standpoint, and then we dealt with the police role in the escape, Smalley escape. Quite a show. It was one of our largest audiences, and Sherrod has agreed to buy a drink for Mr. Slow and myself because our numbers topped his numbers last night. We are laughing because we know that Sherrod's numbers are usually the largest numbers. But last night we beat him. Um, and as he would say, you all only beat me because people fast. Oh, it was such a wonderful time last night. Quite a good show. We got a lot of feedback on that show. Last week, Friday, we had the independent show. It's also was a big show, very big show. The numbers, the number of people who looked at the show after we had a large live audience, but in terms of those who looked at the show after last week's show with Dr. Nigel Westmus, Apostle Nigel London, and Sister Manza Walton Desir, that show went viral, really went viral, and I promised to bring them back, maybe next week, but if not next week, definitely the other week. Next week, we will be down to the last lap for the local government election. So maybe next week would be out, but certainly the following week, and to bring back that panel to continue to explore the independence issue. But that was quite a show, and quite a broad audience, wide audience. Good evening, and I'd like to say thanks to all of you. A couple of you did make contributions to Politics 101, and in all the hustle and bustle, I sometimes forget to say thanks. Thanks to you who have made donations to Politics 101. I can assure you they came in very, 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 very handy. To all our viewers on Channel 9, I want to say thanks to you. We always forget that on the weekend. I think Friday, Saturday, and Sunday we are on Channel 9. And a lot of our senior citizens depend on Channel 9 to carry the shows. So Channel 9 carries the shows on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I visited a couple of communities, and I passed through Melanie. I think it was yesterday. Yesterday was Thursday. I went to Melanie to run an errand, and a few senior citizens saw me and expressed their thanks for what we do. And I asked them where they got it from, and they all got it from Channel 9. Channel 9. So I want to pick up the Channel 9 audience that tune into our programs on weekend. On weekend. I want to say happy birthday to Jillian Benjamin from Maryland, Washington, D.C. area. Her birthday was last week, and I was asked um, by her sister. Uh, I was told by her sister it was her birthday, and I should have sent out shouts to her since last week, but we got into the hustle, and I kept forgetting. Jillian is a loyal viewer. I think she's more loyal to the Bostonian morning time, the Guyanese morning time. I think the name has changed. The Guyanese more. I think she's more loyal to the Guyanese morning time. But we are sister programs, and so it's all in the family, all in the family. Jillian, happy birthday, belated as it is, but we love you here, and we appreciate all the assistance and help that you continue to give to our program. For all of you who have had birthdays over the last week or so, um, we want to say happy birthday to you. It is not that we forget those things. Those things are very, very important. And every now and again, please let us know when you're celebrating a birthday, so that we are able to give you a shout out. A good evening to all of you. Good evening to all of you who are joining us. I know Friday night is a tough night, a tough night, because it's the night people go out and take up their little tooks and, take up their little walks. Those of us who want to be explicit, to say, go and take your little drink and so on. Friday night is that kind of night. So when people are able to tune in on a Friday night, we say, wow, bingo, because we know you're going beyond the call of duty. And these days, with the smartphone and all of that, you're able to take your TV with you. You're able to take your TV with you. So people can still tune in on a Friday evening. Talking about TV, we are on a channel, we are on our YouTube channels, which have grown considerably. And so if you have a smartphone, a smart TV with YouTube, you're able to get our programs on television, on your smart television. I visited one of my friends a couple of weeks ago in Phoenix, Arizona, and he was showing me, look, I get you on TV. I don't have to worry with phone no more. Look, you're here, right here on TV. So those of you with smart TV and you don't want to squeeze your eye to watch the phone, you can get us on YouTube, two channels: Politics 101 channel, Dr. David Hines Hindsight channel, and I want this is our Open Word channel. The Open Word we do on weekends and Sunday evenings, sometimes on Saturday evenings, but mostly on Sunday evenings at 7 o'clock. The Open Word with Dr. David Hines. I want you to go to our YouTube channel and subscribe to our channel so we can grow that channel. We can grow the Open Word channel, so you will know when the Open Word is on. You will be alerted. So if you are near whatever your phone or whatever your tablet is now, as you know, a very popular thing, just go on the Open Word with Dr. David Hines and subscribe to that channel so that we can grow that channel. We already have the Politics 101 channel, the Dr. David Hines Hindsight channel, and now the Open Word channel. We want you to grow. We want us to grow that Open Word channel. As you know, on Open Word, we've been dealing with oil with Professor Thomas. We're going to broaden that to include other conversations. But we have been featuring Professor Thomas. I think we have done about 4 editions thus far on oil and gas. And I know a lot of you are appreciating it because We are getting very good viewership on the Politics 101 channel, the Hindsight channel, and on Facebook, Politics 101, Cams TV. But the Open Word channel, we need to grow that Open Word channel. We need to grow it. So please subscribe to that Open Word channel, the Open Word with Dr. David Hines on YouTube. Subscribe to that channel. Subscribe to that channel so we can grow multiple areas, multiple sources of information. So when one site is down, we have the other. Facebook is down, we're able to get our programs on YouTube. So please subscribe to our Open Word channel. The poster there is on the screen. Again, welcome to everyone on a Friday night tuning in to Politics 101. Tonight we are saying that the opposition and its supporters, that is you and me, the opposition and its supporters, have to get tough. We have to get serious. That's our discussion tonight. And I want to emphasize that tonight. I want to emphasize that tonight because early in the week we did a program that we should press on. And what I did on that program is that I laid out for us to recognize what we are living through in Guyana today. What we are living through in Guyana today. And that is that we are living in serious times. We're living in a country where the ruling party has sucked up all the political space. And so one is answering the question, why is it the PPP is behaving the way it's behaving? Why is it doing as it likes? The other day, yesterday, I think, people's homes were bulldozed on the highway. That's not new. That has been going on. It went on at Linden, it went on at Mocha, it went on at People's Stands in Georgetown. So it's not new. It went on at Success. So it's not new. It's not new. But why is the PPP continuing to do that? Why is the PPP behaving the way it is behaving? Governments have always overreached, always, and governments will always overreach. But why this particular overreach on the part of the People's Progressive Party? And we sought to answer that question early in the week by saying this government is behaving the way it's behaving because the customary check on governments are not there. For governments to work, the idea of government is that we create an institution to maintain order among us, because the general feeling is that as human beings, we start with self-preservation. Some people call it selfishness and all of that, but I prefer to use the term self-preservation. That as human beings, we start by trying to preserve self. Whether that self is the individual self or the family or the community, we start with self. And if we were to have a society in which there are no checks and balances, then each individual or each family would do as it pleases. I always say to my students, imagine if you were going home from school in the evening and there were no traffic lights. You'll take hours and hours and hours to get home depending on where you live, because each driver is going to try to get his or her way. And the end product is that none of us will get our way. And so one had to create this whole notion of the government in order to maintain order among us. I think one European philosopher say mankind in its natural state, his life would be short, nasty, and brutish. And so you have to create this Levitian, this government. So the idea of government is really to maintain order in society. But one has to balance, because man shall not live by order alone. Order must not be at the expense of freedom. So we create a government to maintain order, but we also put another burden on the government to say, while you maintain this order, do not violate our human freedoms. So government has this dual duty of maintaining order in the society, but also ensuring that our freedoms remain intact. So there is this constant tension between freedom and order. And it fluctuates. Sometimes as the government reaches further on its side, freedoms decrease. And then we are dependent on institutions in the society to say to the government, you're veering too much on the side of order, and bring it back to freedom. So every time the government takes an action and we take the government to court, and the court says to the government, no, you can't do that, it is against the rules, the constitution, then we are bringing the pendulum back to freedom. So we have this constant movement from freedom to order. The executive government is there to maintain order, but we have other institutions in the society to ensure that that government does not go too far. And if it goes too far, we have to bring it back. Of course, the optimum would be right in the middle. 50% order, 50% freedom. But sometimes we have where the government goes to 90% order and 10% freedom. And we are saying that in Guyana, we are tending in that direction if we're not there already. That there is much more order in the society than there is freedom. And that the order comes at the expense of freedom. And when we have an overabundance of order, it's no longer order. It becomes autocracy. It becomes disorder. Too much order is disorder. So we have the government with this overwhelming amount of political space, and we the people, our freedom, the space for freedom is very small. And you know, when a government is tending too much on the side of order, it is because the levers in the society to bring it back to freedom are not working. And that's the point I wanted to make early in the week. The other branches of government, such as the courts and the parliament, they are not working. They are not doing their job of ensuring that the executive government does not take up and suck up all the space, all the political space. We don't have the other institutions in society. We talk about the branches of government, the court, the legislative branch. But we're also talking about the other arms of government, or the state, as we call it, the other arms. The government is just an arm of the state. The state meaning the entire country, the space that the entire country takes up. The government is just one arm of that state. You have the coercive arm of the state. The army, the police, the paramilitary organizations. Those are what we call the coercive arms of the state. The government is the administrative arm of the state. We have the economic arms of the state. If the state owns economic institutions, they represent the economic arm of the state. Some will argue we have what is called the welfare arm of the state. That part of the state that looks after the safety of people to ensure that there are not big fires like what happened the other day at Mahdia and what happened at another location in the interior. So we have all these arms of the state, and then we have the branches of the government, and they all have to work to make the system work, because each of them is a part of something larger than itself, and that thing that is larger than itself is the state. And what we have in Guyana is that the arms of the branches of the government and the arms of the state, they are all being overpowered by the executive branch of the state, what we call the government. They're being overpowered. The executive government overpowers the legislature by controlling it with a two-seat majority. It overpowers the court by hollering at the court and threatening the court and not regularizing the leading members of the court, keeping the court in limbo, threatening the court. You're into murky waters. It is undermining the court. It is undermining the coercive arm of the state. It is using the coercive arm of the state by manipulating it to get that coercive arm to use against its political opponents. That is why that was the excitement when Ogunse and the WPA challenged the coercive arm of the state directly. The government get jumpy because they knew that what the WPA was doing, it was going straight to the heart of one of the institutions, one of the most important institutions, and saying to that institution, you ought not to allow yourself to be overpowered by the political government. So we have this government that is manipulating the formal organs of control in the society. All of them. It is using the economics of government and state. That is the money in the treasury, which it is charged to spend. The parliament disburses the money, and the parliament they control. So you can say the PPP is disbursing the money because they control the parliament. And then the political government spends the money. So here's the PPP disbursing money and spending money. And the money is supposed to be spent on the people, not on the PPP supporters. That is unconstitutional for a government to be spending money on its supporters. It ought to be spending money on the country. And the country has institutions, educational institutions, health institutions, safety institutions, infrastructure institutions. The money ought to be spent through those institutions, what the economists call due diligence. But this government is spending the money on its supporters, or who it feels like spending money on. So it's saying to its supporters, we're going to give you so much. And then it's saying to those who are not its supporters, we're going to give you so much. And that is illegal, that is unconstitutional. Monies are supposed to be spent through government agencies and state agencies. Any president who goes to the corner of the road in Monrepo or Buxton or anywhere and give away money is violating the Constitution. That is not how money should be spent. But that is how this government is spending money. So it is dispersing the money to itself, and then it's spending the money how it feels like, against the rules and the laws of the country. And so we have a government that is totally out of control. Whether it's in the way it spends money, in the way it uses the coercive arms of the state. What the hell is the police doing going after somebody who's pulling down some party flag? No, there may be some charge. There's a charge for anything that a human being does, a citizen does. You name something, the way our constitution, our laws are written, you begin breaking laws from the time you step out of your door. Because every time something goes wrong, we make a new law. So theoretically, one is violating laws from the time you step out of your door. But a lot of those laws are frivolous laws. And any democratic government would not invoke frivolous laws. I'm making the point that there may be some law against tearing down party material. But in tearing down a flag from the PPP, who are you hurting? Are you hurting somebody? Are you doing somebody? No. You are preventing other people from seeing a party flag. That's all. You know, in 1983, I was leading a march in Buxton against hunger. School children came out from schools. They joined the march. And they were going into other schools and urging school children to come out and join the march. And they went into what is now the Friendship Secondary School, or Buxton Secondary School. And the students had just picked tomato. I was about to say tomato, but I'm not in the United States. The students just picked tomato. As my classmate, Buddy Ward, you said chimachi. They just picked chimachi and they had the tomato there, and the students went into the school and they went downstairs and they were urging their fellow students to come out and join the march. And I think one or two of them mashed 2 or 3 tomatoes. I wasn't there, I was upstairs talking to the older students. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, the police came with a warrant to my house and to say that I was charged, I have to appear in court. And what was my charge? My charge was damaging a tomato or tomato. Damaging a tomato. That was the charge against me. Damaging a tomato. I went to court and there was a magistrate named Chinta from India. And that lady was so outraged. Yes, that was a charge that's still on our books from the time of slavery, when the slaves and so on could not destroy crops. It was called destroying crops or something like that. But those are all colonial charges that are still on our books. And the police charged me for that. And I went in front of Miss Chinta. In those days, you know, Kwayan and Moses Bagwan would teach us to defend ourselves. They would teach us the law. So I was defending myself. I didn't have a lawyer. That was a small case. But before the case can be heard, Miss Chinta said, "What kind of charge have you brought in my court?" And the police tried to explain about, and she chased them. She said, "Get out of my court. Why are you bringing such a charge in my court? Damaging a tomato, you a slave charge." And she chased the police out of the court, dismissed the case. So there are charges for any and everything on the books. It doesn't mean that the police ought to get into it, but the PPP is getting the police into this nonsense. So we live in a country where the political government, the executive arm of the government, the executive branch of the government, controls all other institutions, either by manipulating them, by threatening them, by coercing them. They're doing that. And so the space for order is overexpanded, and the space for freedom is very, very contracted. That is not a normal society. And so what I sought to ask, why is this so? And I have located the origins of this over-politicized state in the 2020 election. And my argument is that the 2020 elections were not elections. They were not even selections, as we used to call them in the old days. The 2020 elections were really a medium for the reorganization of the state and the society, the state, the government, and the society. That oil had come to Guyana. And the geopolitical forces, which means the external forces who have an interest in that oil, the internal forces who have an interest in that oil and the wealth that comes from it, those forces conspired to create a new order that they feel will best serve oil. You see, at the end of the Second World War, the victors of the war, the Americans, the British, the French, the Russians, they were the Soviets then, they got together in New Hampshire, Bretton Woods. And what they did there is that they created a new world order. They said, look, we've been fighting among ourselves. We fought 2 world wars and we have to stop. And the reason we've been fighting these world wars is that we've been fighting over the wealth of the world. So they created a new world order, and they created institutions like the IMF and the World Bank and the World Trade Organization. They created these institutions to regulate the world, a new world order. And what happened in 2020 is that global, regional, hemispheric, and local forces decided to use the 2020 election to create a new Guyanese political order. That I am arguing that the 2020 elections were not mere elections. Those elections presented the moment for the institution of a new political order in Guyana. And as a part of that new political order was the installation of a government bereft of checks and balances. And the one requirement of that government was that it would be loyal to those who were instrumental in installing it in power. The PPP, therefore, is the beneficiary of a regime change that put in place a new Guyanese political and economic order. Those forces had 2 choices: the PPP or the PNC/APNU, because those are our 2 political Levitians. And for whatever reason, they chose the PPP. Does it mean that the PPP did not get votes at the election? Does it mean that the PPP may not have won the election? No, it doesn't mean that. The PPP may have won the election. But the elections was not about winning or losing. It was about installing. That is why we can't know who won the election. And so the PPP is in power as a result of a new Guyanese economic and political order. That used the election to impose that order. And when you install a government, you have to remove the usual checks from that government because it's an exchange. You install me to carry out your new economic and political order. What do I get? That is what the PPP is going to ask those who installed it. What do I get in exchange for doing your bidding? And the invariable answer is that you get to use the political government without checks and balances. We are going to pull off. We're not going to be the usual checks on you. And I am arguing that that explains the behavior of the PPP. Now, there are all kinds of collateral damage that comes along with regime change. And one of it is the weakening of the opposition. You study anywhere there was regime change, whether it was in Iraq or in Libya, wherever there was regime change. In our Guyana in 1964, there was regime change. The 1964 election was also a moment of regime change. In that case, the PNC benefited from regime change. The Americans and the British wanted a government that was not pro-communist. And the PPP was pro-communist. They didn't want them. And so what they did was they come up with a new electoral system to get the PPP out of government. And who were the beneficiaries? The PNC. The PNC won. The PNC and the UF won the 64 election. Don't get me wrong. They won the election. But they won the election because there was a changed system. But it was regime change. And it took 3 decades. The world had to change. The Cold War had to come to an end before we were able to get rid of that imposition. So we now had regime change in 2020 with a government with no checks. People are asking, how can the PPP government be doing what are the Americans doing? Some are even speculating the Americans would remove them and so on. No, the Americans will not remove the PPP government unless the PPP government threatens the American interests. Plain and simple. Does it mean the Americans will not condemn the PPP, call them to Washington, threaten them? They're going to do all of those. But they're not going to actively remove the PPP government unless and until that government threatens their interest. This is not anti-Americanism that I am talking about here, as some people think. I am stating a reality. Foreign governments have their own interest in a local situation, and their interest is usually not the same as the interest of the local opposition or the local people. And they don't change their interests until that interest is threatened or the order is changed, the world order changes. The PNC was not called to book on free and fair elections by the Americans until the Cold War ended. When a new world order came into being. So, when you have a government that is out of order, no checks and balances, doing as it likes, it is usually the local opposition that is tasked with opposing that government. But that local opposition itself is weakened by the very regime change. Weakened. All the opposition parties are weakened. The PNC, the AFC, the WPA, they've all been weakened by regime change. Because regime change means reduction of the space for the opposition. But it is that very weakened opposition that has to lead the struggle for the restoration of normalcy in the country. So you have this dilemma, a weakened opposition, but that very weakened opposition is tasked with pushing the doors that have been locked by regime change. What I'm basically saying here is the PPP is not governing by normal rules. It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. There is no pressure. Governments succeed not because governments do good things, not because governments are good. Governments do good things when they are pressured to do good things and when their very existence is threatened. Some people say government is a necessary evil. Some people say it's a necessary good. Some say it is an unnecessary evil. Some say it is an unnecessary good. Most people tend to think that it's a necessary evil. If we didn't have government, there would be chaos in human society. So that's the good of government. But when it comes to maintaining freedom and justice in society, governments have a bad record. And this government that we have here is probably no longer a necessary good or a necessary evil. It has become an unnecessary evil. It doesn't have to play by the rules. And it is not playing by the rules. When a government is behaving like this, well, there are rules, but we don't have any pressure to obey the rules. If that government is grounded in political morality, it will say, although we are not pressured to obey the rules, we will obey the rules because it's the moral thing to do. But this government that we have is saying, we don't have to obey the rules, and because of that, we will not obey the rules. There's no political morality. So this government is not governing by the rules. But it is pressuring the opposition to play by the rules. And maybe the external forces are pressuring the opposition to play by the rules. So you have a government with built-in power that is not playing by the rules, and the opposition with no built-in power is being forced to play by the rules. That is what we have in Guyana. The opposition has to worry about whether it should go on the street and march, as you all call it, boots on the ground. It has to worry whether its leaders will be locked up, because the government has shown that it will lock up anybody anytime, because it could do it. Whether it's the rule, they lock you up on a Friday and keep you there Saturday, Sunday. And they're doing it because they can do it. So the opposition now has to worry, are our leaders and followers going to be locked up? Are they going to be beaten up by the police? Because we have the political government telling people, if somebody called you a soup drinker, call the police. And then the police goes and arrests those people. So we are not governed by rules and laws. We are governed by diktats from the political government, which is the party. It's the party. It's Freedom House running Guyana. So they're forcing the opposition to play by the rules. The opposition has to wonder, when we go there, are they going to put thugs? And those thugs are going to beat up Indian people. And then we are going to be charged with it. The opposition has to worry about doing normal things that normal opposition should be doing any day, every day. What do you do in situations like these? I am arguing from this platform that the opposition has to find creative ways of opposing an abnormal government. Have to find creative ways. You cannot engage a system in the normal ways when that system is operating abnormally. If rain fall and the place start to flood, you got to get sandbag and to keep out that water, because in a normal day, rain will fall and the water won't come in. But when you have a great flood, as we had a couple of years ago, you got to find creative ways of keeping the water out. The normal seawall can't keep the water out. The opposition is challenged to find creative ways to oppose the government. And my criticism of the opposition, I am sympathetic to them because, as I pointed out tonight and early in the week, they are in a situation not of their own making. There was a new Guyana order that was agreed on before 2020, and the 2020 elections were used to implement that order. The PNC, its government, became a victim of this new world order. So in that sense, I'm sympathetic to the opposition. But I am saying that when confronted with abnormal situation, human beings find creative ways to, first of all, survive, and second, to get rid of that abnormality. And I think where we in the opposition have been found wanting is that we have not been up to the task of coming up with creative ways to do things. I remember, young boy, come from Buxton, and we have a WPA meeting on the mall. And apparently there was something that the police was coming to break up the meeting. And I remember Kwayana said to everybody, sit down. And everybody sit down on Merriman's Mall there. And those who were coming to break up the meeting could not do anything because they were coming to break up a meeting and they expect people to be running. And Kwayana tell us, everybody sit down. Oh my God. I must have been 18, 19 or whatever it was there, but I was mesmerized. Because it was a creative way of dealing with a government that was prepared to use power at its disposal. The police or whoever was coming to break that meeting up expected everybody to run. And the fact that we creatively didn't run, we sit down. We broke up the plan. this opposition has to get down to the business of finding creative ways to deal with this abnormality. This will not last. What the friend said, this too shall pass. But it's real. We are in the presence of it. People are dying. People are feeling the squeeze. And we have to find creative ways. The task for the opposition is to find creative ways to push back against a government and a regime that is out of control. The Americans are not going to push it back for us. The Americans' interests are being taken care of. The government is fulfilling its requirement as far as the external forces are concerned. They don't even have to appeal a ruling against their interests by our court. The government is doing that for them. The opposition has to get serious and get tougher. We cannot continue to operate in the illegality. For on the one hand, we are saying the government is not respecting the rule of law. But we are, having said that, we are operating within that context of no respect for the rule of law. In that sense, our actions have the outcome of validating the government's lack of the rule of law. Tough decisions will have to be made. And I am arguing here tonight that when faced with the government onslaught, we as opposition have been taking the easy way out. And that is to conform to a rule of law, even when we are saying there is no respect for rule of law. That is in effect what we have been doing. If we say the police is being used in a political way, and we are acquiescing to it, then we end up by our action enabling that misuse of the police. I'm going somewhere. I'm going somewhere with this. And I want you all to follow my line of thought. We, the people and the opposition, are faced with abnormal government. A government that is violating all the normal principles of governance. Some call it good government, some call it democratic governance. And we have to decide whether we, by our actions, are going to continue to validate those unconstitutional, illegal, and immoral action by the government. We have got to find creative ways. And we have to do it together. The danger in when you're facing a government that is out of order, you always hear people talk about a front, a national front, an opposition front, and all opposition this. In the old days, we had the PCD, the Patriotic Coalition for Democracy. Later on, we had the APNU, AFC. When you're up against an illegal government, When you are up against a government that respects, that does not respect the normal law, you have to bring to bear all your forces. Those who might have disagreed on individual things, we now have to find areas of agreement, and we have to have a common front. And I have to say that this opposition has been found wanting. We have not been able to create a common front against this government. When you have a strong government, you can't afford a weak opposition. And as individual opposition groups and individuals, we are weak. In order to push back against a government with this kind of latitude and power, we need a maximization of opposition strength. It doesn't mean that we stop disagreeing as opposition. What it means is that we find a minimum program on which we can agree. And we all agree that we have a government that is out of control. We all agree that we have a government that is governing based on racial discrimination. We all in the opposition agree that we have a government that is prepared to use the armed forces and manipulate. We have areas of agreement. What we don't have is an organization that is going to act on those agreements. And we are getting our asses cut because of that. That is my message here tonight. There's standard ways when an opposition back is against the wall. There's standard ways that the opposition must act. When external forces in the 70s were closing in Burnham, Jagan went to Burnham, and they had talks. How can we keep out the external forces? The PPP came up with what they call critical support for the Burnham government. A government that they oppose, that they're trying to bring down, but in the face of external forces, they offered critical support. I think some of us argued for uncritical support. Or some people, not some of us. Some people argued that there must be uncritical support. And Jagan said, no, he will give critical support. Later on in the 1980s, again, as the new world order is coming, the old world order is coming to an end. The Cold War is coming to an end. This time, Burnham goes to Jagan. And there are talks again. In 1990, the WPA went to the PNC and says, okay, we have to have free elections. We're not going to get a voters list on time. We will have to postpone this election. Rather than keeping the PNC by itself, WPA said, let all of us come together and have an interim government to oversee the transition to free and fair election. The PPP said the PNC won't agree. WPA went to the PNC. First thing Hoyt said, yes, I agree. We couldn't implement it because the PPP decided that they're going to stay outside because they were about to use the superior numbers of East Indians to win an election. And we were hoping that we could have demonstrated to our people that the three parties could work together. And so we would have had a power sharing government after the 92 election. The PPP undermined that. Again in 1997, after the Ord-Munston Accord, and the PPP got 2 years of their term slashed. The WPA went and said, okay, let us together, all three parties, the PPP, the WPA, the PNC, let us come together and in those 2 years, run the government together. In 2020, again, this time not the WPA, but I as a WPA member, I said, we're into an election and regime change is coming. And one of the ways we could stand up against regime change is for the APNU, AFC, and the PPP to come together in an interim government. No. The PPP said no. Jacques Diop said to me, no. He said, install us, declare us the winner, and then we will talk about a national government. And they declared him the winner, and we're still waiting for that talk about national government. Sisters and brothers, when an opposition is up against the wall, it has to find creative ways. And this burden is not just on the politicians, it's on you all, the followers, who have to tell your party, get on with it. The party should not be able to come to you with some sad story when the boat done gonna fall. You have to impress upon your parties. And I assume that we in the WPA, the party that I come from, I'm not speaking for them tonight, but I assume that we're one of those parties. Put pressure on us to be creative. We cannot play by the so-called rules when the government is not playing by the so-called rules. The government is playing by extra parliamentary rules, extrajudicial rules. They are creating the landscape. And we have to find creative ways. Nothing should be off the table. Yes, we know this is not the age of revolution. This is not the age where you pick up guns and go in the hills and fight guerrilla warfare. Yes, this is not the age of that. So I can't be a fool to be talking about some guerrilla revolution. I can't be talking about violent overthrow of the government. We're not into that era. That era has either gone or it's gone to sleep. So I can't be talking about that. But I am obviously talking about a certain kind of militancy that at least brings our country back to equilibrium. The government takes nothing off the table. It doesn't take bulldozing people off the table. It doesn't take using the police against the citizenry off the table. It doesn't take bribery off the table. It doesn't take using the police to lock up opponents off the table. The government takes nothing off the table. The PPP leaves everything off the table. And my question here tonight, should the government take certain things off the table? Or should the government should the opposition take certain things off the table? Or should it meet the government at that level? You take nothing off the table, we take nothing off the table. You take something off the table, then we will take something off the table. There are many ways outside of violent overthrow of a government to bring a government, including and install government, to its senses. And our opposition, we the opposition, I include myself, maybe I shouldn't because nobody has elected me to anything, so I shouldn't include myself as a leader, but I take that liberty to say we, the leaders, are found wanting. We, the leaders of the opposition, whether we are PNC, WPA, AFC, independents, we have been found wanting in the way that we have dealt or not dealt with this government. And we've got to get serious. We've got to get tougher. And we've got to get sensible. And if I were to give a grade to us on serious, it would not be a passing grade. On tougher, it would not be a passing grade. On sensible, it would not be a passing grade. This is my call for the weekend. Sensible, tough, and serious, or our people are going to continue to pay the price. It's okay to call those who have gone over house slaves and so on, and they need to be ridiculed. I don't have a problem with that. But we also must ask the question, why is the flow one way? Why are people defecting from us to them, and people are not defecting from them to us? We have to answer that question. I don't think the defections are going to be a determining factor, but it is not something that we should ignore. Because it says something about the government and the way it is behaving, but it also says something about us. It's Friday night. I don't want to keep you all longer. We come in peace. We're going to go in peace. On Sunday night, we're going to be talking about oil and you. Professor Thomas with another installment at 7 o'clock on Sunday night. We're going to be talking oil again. And then on Monday, when we come back, we continue our discourses. Ultimately, it's about righting the wrongs. Ultimately, it's about freeing ourselves from the shackles that have resulted from the change that we saw in 2020. An election doesn't last 5 months. And if an election lasts 5 months, it's not because one side make it last 5 months. It's that something about that election was abnormal. Good night.